This is where projects come to life. Our showrooms are designed to inspire with the latest products from top brands, curated in an inviting, hands-on environment, and a team of industry experts to support your project. We'll be there to make sure everything goes as planned, from product selection to delivery coordination. At Ferguson Bath, Kitchen and Lighting Gallery, your project is our priority.
Discover great brands like Kohler at your local Ferguson showroom.
The living room is where you make life's most beautiful memories. But your sofa shouldn't be the one remembering them. The new life-resistant, high-performance furniture collection from Ashley is designed to withstand all the spills, slip-ups, and muddy paws that come with the best parts of life. Ashley high-performance sofas and recliners are soft, on-trend, and easy to clean. Shop the high-performance furniture in-store or online at ashley.com. Ashley, for the love of home.
Welcome to True Crime Garage. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, thanks for listening. I'm your host, Nick, and with me, as always, is a man who has one sponge and uses it for everything. Here is the captain.
It's good to be seen and good to see you. Thanks for listening. Thanks for telling a friend.
Today we are drinking Gravel Donuts because we love ourselves. Gravel Donuts is a hazy IPA from the good folks over at Outer Belt Brewing. Its juicy flavors including pineapple, citrus, and blueberry, and all of the hops with not a whole lot of the harsh bite. ABV, 6.5% garage grade, 4.5 bottle caps out of 5. And let's give some thanks and praise to our friends that helped us fill up the old fridge for this week's set of shows. First up, a cheers to Renee from the upper northern peninsula of the Mitten State.
And a big We Like Your Jib goes out to Julie Oswald from Franklin, Indiana.
Next, we have a cheers to Caitlin Camplain in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And last but certainly not least, a double-fisted cheers to Whitney and Brett in Los Angeles, California. Everyone we mentioned, they went to truecrimegarage.com and helped us out with this week's beer run. And for that, we thank you.
Yeah, BWRUN Beer Run. Make sure you go to truecrimegarage.com and sign up on the mailing list. And Colonel, that's enough of the business.
All right, everybody, gather around, grab a chair, grab a beer. Let's talk some true crime. It's a famous trope in true crime. Means, motive, and opportunity. Our concern with motive, not required among the legal elements of murder, are rooted in our need to understand why the most serious of all crimes, the taking of a life, occurs. What drives humans to kill other humans? Famously, the most common motives are greed, jealousy, lust, and revenge. But what about when a killer strikes for none of these reasons? What if a murder is carried out just because the killers are bored and because they can? What if there is really no motive at all? How do we make sense of that? That's the question we are asking ourselves here in the garage today. This is True Crime Garage, and this is the case of Hauff and Suzanne Zantop, also known as the Dartmouth Murders. To tell this true crime story, we must first present to you one of the loveliest of couples, the Xantopes. Half and Suzanne Xantop were as brilliant and accomplished as you can get. Both were born in Germany. Half and Suzanne met at Stanford, where both were pursuing graduate degrees. Half was working toward a PhD in geology, and Suzanne in political science. The two fell in love. They married in the Andes in Argentina in 1970. The Xantopes lived all over the world. Half worked as a geologist, and Suzanne taught German and literature. As they moved around from Spain to Germany to Colombia, they had two daughters, Veronica and Mariana. Then in the 70s, Half was asked to join the faculty at Dartmouth College as a professor of earth sciences, specializing in economic geology. This is one of the premier academic institutions in the United States, and there was a job there for Suzanne as well. The Xantopes flourished at Dartmouth. Suzanne became the chair of the Department of German Studies and published several books on German colonialism. Both professors were popular with the students and thoroughly entrenched themselves as pillars of the Dartmouth community. The Xantopes loved to entertain. The couple and the home were known for their eclectic dinner parties, lively conversations, and warmth and acceptance of all of their guests. Their home was in Etna, New Hampshire, a small community within the quaint town of Hanover, where Dartmouth is located. This area of New England is frigid in the wintertime, but gorgeous with fir trees blanketed with snow and winding roads up mountainsides. These are the kind of towns where, despite the thousands of students at the college, the locals all know each other and greet each other at the pharmacy and at the general store. Half and Suzanne were always busy, always going, full of life, until in an instant, that was all taken away. And that instant took place sometime on Saturday, January 27th, 2001.
So on January 27th, 2001, they were having a guest over for dinner.
Yeah, that evening, Roxana Verona, a professor of French and Italian at Dartmouth College, she arrived at the Xantopes' home. Roxanne had been to the Xantopes' warm and welcoming home many times, enjoying the couple's famous salon-style dinner parties where the intellectual elite came to enjoy Suzanne's cooking and engage in stimulating conversation about things like world affairs, travel, politics, and current events. Roxanne was the only guest that evening, and Half was heading out to a friend's birthday gathering. So this was geared to be dinner for two, with the possibility that Half would return and join the ladies in the latter part of the evening. Roxana arrived at the Xantopes at 6:30 p.m. She got out of her car and rang the doorbell, but no one answered the door, and Roxana was surprised to find the door unlocked when she tried the handle. She walked in, announcing herself loudly to the room. She heard nothing, got no response, and she noted that there was none of the usual smells of delicious food cooking in the kitchen. So this all seemed very strange to her, of course. She was invited over for a dinner party, bringing a salad along with her. She walked toward the study because she could see that the light was on in the study. When she gets near the study, unfortunately, she found 55-year-old Suzanne Xantop laying on the study floor, blood pooled under her and all over her clothing. She was clutching her glasses in her right hand. She was pale and lifeless. And then she saw Half, 62 years old. He lay on the floor near the desk, his head on the bottom shelf of a bookcase. It would appear that he had fallen and his head landed on the bottom shelf of that bookcase.
This is an extremely bloody scene.
Yes, Half too was covered in blood. His skin was white as a ghost. Roxana ran out of the house. She jumps in her car And her plan is she's heading for the next door neighbor's house. This is the McCollums, who she knew through the Xantops. Bob McCollum was a doctor. So in this panic, she doesn't know. She walks into this situation, this scene, this murder scene, her two dear friends, bloody and lifeless. She doesn't know, is the killer still in the home or on their large property? So she wasn't going to sit around and risk calling police and paramedics from that house. No, she wanted to get out of there. She went to the neighbor's house. Bob's a doctor. She thought, he's going to know what to do. So when Roxana pounded on their door, the McCollums, they let her inside, and they're listening as she kind of gasped out, trying to explain what she had just seen. Audrey McCollum calls 911, and she's attempting to calm down Roxana during this time. Bob and their adult daughter, her name's Cindy, they go running over to the Xantops house. Of course, they saw the same thing that Roxana had. Cindy called 911 from the Xantops phone after her father checked Suzanne for a pulse and then Huff for a pulse. And of course, there was none. Both victims were found cold, and they had already passed by this point. There was nothing that could be done. First at the scene, as far as law enforcement goes here, Captain, the scene, this is 115 Trescott Road. So we get Officer Brad Sargent, who arrives on the scene, and he's immediately calling for backup and reinforcements right away. Reinforcements included officers from the Hanover Police Department. This included the New Hampshire State Police as well, and the Grafton County Sheriff's Department. So this is a calling all cars, all hands on deck situation. An ambulance was called off because of the state of the victims, and a medical examiner was requested in place of an ambulance. Hanover Police Chief Nick Gaiconi arrives and is on the scene, and this is, look, it's a double homicide, so I hate to say these words, that this is a very big deal. But we have to keep in mind that there's not a lot of murders that take place in this area.
Well, it becomes a bigger deal because it's an upscale neighborhood.
Correct.
And it's upscale victims. These are two college professors. These are prominent figures in the community.
I don't say this to insult any city out there, but this is not downtown Los Angeles or downtown Chicago. This is a big deal, a bigger deal in this area. It's not like the unfortunate violence on the rise that we are seeing even in my home state. So we have all hands on deck. We have the Hanover police chief. He wants the scene to be very controlled. He wants everything to be handled very properly. We've said this before. The best detectives out there, the best police chiefs will tell you that the biggest part of your investigation is making sure that when we figure out who did this and we find that person and we get them, let's make sure all of this stands up in court. Let's do everything by the book. Let's do everything very professional, and let's look under every rock. Now, there are some major items to note here right out of the gate on this double homicide investigation. So this is what they're going to learn from talking to family and friends. Number one, the Xantops were fastidious about locking their doors. So even when they were home, they host a lot of these dinner parties. Their guest mentioned to police, even when they would go and let one of their guests in for the dinner party or let one of the guests out after an evening of gathering together, they were locking the door. So even when they're home, they're locking the door, and even when they're entertaining, they're keeping the doors locked. Crime trends and statistics is another important thing here. The entire state of New Hampshire back then at that time would typically only see about 20 to 25 homicides a year. So to have a double homicide in this area of the state seemed very surprising to law enforcement.
Well, and this is a fairly large house, so we have a large crime scene. But because of some of the evidence that law enforcement finds early on, it seems like the crime only took place in Hoff's office. And so that makes it a little bit easier, I think, for law enforcement to investigate.
Well, and that was the third thing for law enforcement of note with this investigation. The Xantop's house itself was a sprawling contemporary home with large windows, providing views of the woods. It's set down the hill and nestled among trees. So this is not a house that was readily noticed by drivers passing through the area. So you compound that, the place where it took, where this all took place, with the idea that they were always locking their doors. So now you're going to have to believe that police suspected that someone selected the home and the Xantops deliberately, that this was a targeted crime and they were the intended victims here. Law
enforcement has a lot of questions. Was there an affair going on? What's the motive here? We have two professors. Is it an angry student? Is it an angry staff member? Is there something going on with the relationship or going on with a friendship?
And you know what? When you're interviewing family and friends and colleagues, and as said, people in the town knew each other. When you're interviewing all these people and you hear time and time again, oh, everybody loved them. Everybody loved the Xantops. As an investigator, you're happy to hear that because you're thinking to yourself, cool, I'm going to find the one person that didn't.
Right.
The crime scene, there was a lot of evidence was observed and collected in the house and even outside as CSIs poured over the structure's interior and the 3-acre property. It was clear that Hauf's positioning with his head on the bottom shelf of that bookshelf, that he had fallen there and his head had pushed back some of the books on that shelf. Both he and Suzanne were fully dressed in warm clothing. A card table was knocked over and laying on Suzanne's legs. A wicker trash basket lay up against Hauf, its contents spilled out on the floor. Documents and papers were thrown around everywhere. One of Suzanne's Birkenstocks was on the floor upside down. A White Pages book was open to the last name T on the desk. And the computer was on a blank screen for an online search site for names and addresses. A fingerprint was found on the desk chair that did not belong to the Xantops.
Well, and when you see a photo of the crime scene, it looks as if they're having like a parent-teacher conference meeting in Hauf's office.
19 prints were collected in total. As the captain said, blood was absolutely everywhere, sprayed all over the study, its contents, the victims, and on the floor. Blood drops led from the study out the front door. So that's a little bit of a trail there that you're looking at.
Well, you were talking about the fingerprints. That's going to be very important. But also we have pretty solid boot prints from a very unique hiking boot.
Yeah. There was a partial bloody boot print in the foyer. 2 more boot prints were found in the downstairs area, and 2 additional bloody prints were found outside as well. And then jackpot, 2 black plastic foot-long knife sheaths lay on the study floor, about 4 feet apart, and both had fingerprints on them. 105 pieces of evidence were collected by the New Hampshire State Police forensic team. This was detailed, thorough work, and all done very professionally. Autopsies on Hauf and Suzanne by the medical examiner, Dr. Thomas Gilson, revealed that they had each been stabbed multiple times in the head, neck, and chest with a very long, very sharp, and very sturdy knife. They had lived for only seconds after the first wounds were inflicted.
So law enforcement is wondering what the motive is, but then you have to start wondering, again, is this a crime committed by one individual or multiple individuals?
Yeah, and think about how the captain just described that scene. It does appear exactly as he said, like there was some kind of meeting being conducted in the study, and this was the end result. 30-plus investigators were assigned to this case. The New Hampshire Attorney General's office was calling the shots on the investigation and how it was going to be handled. And they decided that the best tactic here would be to keep all information close to the vest, allowing the public only bits and pieces of information. In the first news conference held the day after the murders, they called the deaths suspicious. The cause of death was kept under wraps, and the officials refused to answer questions about forced entry to the home or possible suspects. I don't always love this tactic here, Captain, but I think given the circumstances of what we now know about the investigation, I love this choice that's made here. I usually feel that the public can be one of the best weapons in the arsenal for law enforcement, because the public, as much as law enforcement, want to get these bad people off of the streets, people that can do stuff like this. We don't want them running around. We don't want them in our neighborhoods. But here, one, they have a lot of breadcrumb trails to follow based off of what they're finding at the scene. And so they don't need the public's help so much for leads. They have leads to work in the meantime. But this has kind of a two-pronged effect. While you can work those other leads, purposely keeping information from the public, the result here was a firestorm of rumors about what had happened. So this can be good and bad for your investigation, but you're hoping that, right, that there's some truth in some of those rumors, that people start talking and people talking to one another, and that you might get some information by not giving any information.
Well, this is an Ivy League school, and this is going to be big news, obviously, in this small community, and in a community where vicious crimes like this don't take place. So obviously this is going to be run by a bunch of newspapers, but in particular, the college newspaper.
The Dartmouth newspaper, called the Dartmouth, ran with story after story about the murders, and in the absence of information from the police, the theories quickly started getting passed around by people in the community. And then from another paper, The Atlantic, quote, nearly everyone assumed that the killer remained in the vicinity, a troubled student, perhaps, or a faculty rival. A suspicious figure was spotted lurking around dormitories. A suspicious car without state license plates was reported. So this got people talking. This kept people on high alert. When the FBI joined the investigation 1 week later, the range of conjecture went national and then even international. Theories of a Holocaust tie-in circulated. The Xantops were political liberals who often argued that their native country should be more forthright in confronting the evils of its Nazi past. ABC News' Primetime ran a story questioning whether there was a link between the crime and neo-Nazism.
Law enforcement did have a few suspects right away. There was a professor that was visiting Dartmouth that was up for the same position, I believe, at one time as the husband Hoff was. Mm-hmm. And so they thought, maybe, is this a rival colleague that decided to take out his anger on this couple? And then he rented a car, and they found some evidence in his car, what they thought was blood evidence in the trunk, and that turned out to be stool. So it was a trunk full of shit at one point.
New Hampshire Attorney General Philip McLaughlin broke the silence. This was on Thursday, February 1st. He revealed that witnesses had seen Hoff Xantop alive at 10:30 a.m. on Saturday, the 27th. Sometime after that, the couple was stabbed to death by someone they allowed entry into their home. So this is 2 sentences, but it's far better and more detailed information that they had not previously given out. So they're saying how they were killed, that there was no forced entry into the home, and that we know that Hoff was alive and well at 10:30 a.m., so it happened sometime after 10:30 a.m. They also publicly said at the same time, we have no suspects. But the Attorney General said they did not believe there was any danger to the community. He addressed the killers at this press conference as well, saying, quote, the person who did this, who may well be watching should take no comfort in the fact that they have not yet been apprehended. Be patient. We'll be there.
It's been a busy season of events and travel, and your wardrobe has probably taken a beating. Sometimes a total overhaul isn't in the budget, but you can replace some of those worn-out pieces with affordable, high-quality essentials from Quince. Quince has all the seasonal must-have, like cashmere sweaters from $50, 100% European linen shirts, and versatile activewear. The best part, all Quince items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. By partnering directly with top factories, Quince cuts out the cost of the middleman and passes on the savings to us. Isn't that sweet? Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices, along with premium fabrics and finishes. My wardrobe was so out of date. I had holes in places you shouldn't have holes, and I was just out of style. So I treated myself with some organic cotton stretch chinos, some stretch wool dress pants, and a 100% leather cafe racer jacket. I look amazing. Then I treated myself to a Mongolian cashmere pullover hoodie. I look amazing. And look, what I love about Quince products are their top of the line, great quality, but also the styles. They're classic styles, so I'm never going to be out of fashion. Treat yourself with Quince. Upgrade your wardrobe with pieces made to last with Quince. Go to quince.com/garage for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/garage to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/garage. Treat yourself. Check out quince.com/garage today. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Do you have self-care non-negotiables? I didn't. It's something that I struggle with, something that I'm working on every day, every week, and every month. And it's getting better with BetterHelp. When your schedule is packed with kid activities, big work projects, and more, it's easy to let your priorities slip. Even when you know what makes us happy, it's hard to make time for it. But when you feel like you have no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy are more important than ever. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/garage today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/garage. This show is proudly sponsored by BetterHelp. Are you the type of person constantly thinking about the safety of people and things you value most? Trust Simply Safe to protect your home.
You'll sleep better every night knowing Simply Safe's 24/7 monitoring agents are standing by to protect you. And if someone tries to break in, they can send emergency help when you need it most.
The best part is the exclusive Alive Guard protection. Simply Safe agents can act within 5 seconds of receiving your alarm and can even see and speak to intruders inside your home, warning them the police are on their way.
It's no surprise that Simply Safe has been named Best Home Security Systems by U.S. News and World Report for 5 years running, and the best customer service and home security by Newsweek.
We here at the Garage love Simply Safe. That's how we protect the garage studios and our personal homes.
We live in a time of porch pirates and all kinds of uncertainty. Give yourself some peace of mind with your home or your business with Simply Safe. Protect your home this summer with 20% off any new Simply Safe system when you sign up for Fast Protect monitoring. Just visit simplysafe.com/garage.
That's simplysafe.com/garage. There's no safe like Simply Safe. All right, we are back, ladies and germs. Cheers to you all. Tall cans in the air, and cheers to the people in the back.
That's right. Power to the people.
In the back.
The AG here meant business. Now, behind the scenes, there were a lot of things happening. The case was assigned to the Assistant Attorney General, Kelly Ayotte. She advised the public that they should be on the alert for anyone they knew who had exhibited suspicious behaviors in the past week since the murders. A press release stated that the FBI believed that the killer may be exhibiting behavioral changes, have fresh cuts, bruises or wounds, missing work or school, or leaving the area in haste. On February 9th, more than a week out, investigators asked the public to call in tips about any unfamiliar cars seen in Etna or any strange behavior among those who knew the Zantops. While this may seem like a bit of a Hail Mary, the investigators behind the scenes had a whole lot of good old-fashioned detective work cooking.
So like we were saying, if you're law enforcement, you have to dig into every different aspect of their life. But when they looked into their personal lives, it didn't seem like there was much of a motive there.
Yeah, and I was really shocked at this next part in this story here, Captain, because the Boston Globe usually does a pretty bang-up job.
Yeah.
The Spotlight movie, and I mean, it goes on and on and on. We don't have time to go down that road, but I was shocked to see that the Boston Globe ran a salacious article. This was just 3 weeks after the murders, based on an anonymous source or anonymous sources, depending on what source I went to, and described this as, quote, authorities close to the case. That's how they described the sources. Authorities close to the case. The headline was, love affair eyed in New Hampshire killings. Husband involved with unidentified woman. And then the article begins, investigators believe the killings of Dartmouth College professors Half and Suzanne Zantop were crimes of passion, most likely resulting from an adulterous affair involving Half Zantop. But it wasn't true. None of it was true. The newspaper soon retracted the article, rightfully so.
Right.
Should never have run it to begin with. Half wasn't having an affair. The reality was the investigators weren't able to find anyone who had any kind of grudge against Half and Suzanne that was worth killing for. A student disgruntled over a grade or a professor passed over for promotion was unlikely to have carried out this brutal double homicide. And the neo-Nazi thing was a stretch at best. So were tips that the murders were because Suzanne was a feminist or could be motivated by political leanings. But there was one red herring that did distract investigators for a time. Half's teaching assistant, Tom Douglas, told investigators that the only person he could think of who might have had a reason to murder the Zantops was the genealogy professor that the captain had talked about. And however that stuff got in that trunk, we'll never know.
Yeah, I don't think he was.
It was a rental.
It was a rental car, so we can't say he was responsible for it. And they didn't find his stool. They just found remnants of somebody's stool. So
I frequently rent cars, and they
take a dump in the trunk.
They always ask you, upon returning, did you fill up the tank? And I always say yes, and I also shit in the trunk.
Yeah. I took a big dump. I took a big steamy dump in the trunk of your car.
So that was a bit of a distraction.
Yeah, a little bit,
to say the least.
But also, wasn't there? There was a student that they found with a knife, and he had markings on his face.
Yes, that was a problem for the investigation. The other thing too, so the Globe should not have run that article, but what it did was it had an effect that they really didn't hope for. It really smeared the names of some people that they named in that article, right? Like there were people that were reporters that were camping out on this couple's lawn or in the streets in front of their house trying to interview them because they thought this other couple was somehow involved, and it was all based around the idea that there was some kind of affair going on there. And think about this. They had kids. The Zantops had grown children. You're trying to grieve the loss of the sudden loss of your parents. One, none of us want to lose our parents. We don't want to lose them suddenly, but then to have them murdered, and on top of that, your parents' name, your father's name is being smeared in the papers too. I mean, this is just an all around.
Well, they're educators, and it seemed like they let somebody in the house. And again, it looks like there's some kind of meeting. And so you wonder, is this about education? Is this, was this a teacher trying to help out a student? And it took a turn for the worse. I think the other thing, though, too, this, when you look at the video footage and the news coverage of this crime, one, because it's a small college campus, professors, the housing, the time of year with the snow on the ground, the way the investigation took place, it's a knife murder. The way law enforcement interacts with the media, I mean, didn't you get a sense this just felt so similar to the Idaho college murders?
Well, as said, it was a big deal, and it should be a big deal, and it reached a level of, it was a big deal on the national scale. Yeah. And a lot of that has to do with where it took place, just like with the Idaho case. But we cannot, right? We cannot say that the Globe did a complete smear job and just really beat them down here in our coverage of this case to you without we should say this, because some of the sources I have say that the rental car, what was found in the trunk was some kind of moose stew, remnants of a moose stew. So I just want that to be out there that you
mean moose stool? Well,
moose stew. It's considered a northern.
Yeah, it's a food dish, but hey, even if I'm wrong, it's a way better story if we find some stool in the trunk.
Back to the investigation. The New Hampshire State Police Crime Lab worked through all of the evidence. We have Trooper Chuck West was the seasoned investigator spearheading this investigation. Of course, the two knife sheaths were of the greatest interest. They could tell the investigators a lot about their killer or killers. As Judgment Ridge, which will be this week's recommended reading, said about the sheaths, quote, "They were the glass slippers of the Zantop murders. Search the countryside to find their rightful owners and the mystery would be solved," end quote. West, the trooper, followed the sheath evidentiary trail. The knife sheaths were identical. They were made of a black material called Kydex, with black straps and distinctive markings. They bore logos reading SOG Specialty Knives. The sheaths were for a specific model of knife. This is the SOG Seal 2000. The New Hampshire Deputy Medical Examiner said knives like that were consistent with the stab wounds. Unfortunately, the SOG Seal 2000 was SOG Specialty Knives' best-selling knife model. And the knives were not assigned serial numbers.
But the big thing, though, is knives, right? So you're going to go, we're not looking for one killer anymore. We're looking for two.
Yeah, as a detective, I'm not looking at this scene and thinking we have a Snake Eyes type killer here showing up with a knife in each hand. This would appear to me we have two victims, which usually can be suggestive that we have two perpetrators, and then you find two knife sheaths. So I think that the surprising thing to me as a detective would be that they're identical knives. That seems a little oddball here, but nonetheless, the killer's big mistake of leaving these knife sheaths at the scene, we saw what it did in the Idaho murders case. It's going to have a very similar effect in this case, but it's not going to be an easy task for these investigators. We talked about the good old-fashioned detective work that they were doing behind the scenes. That's exactly what's going on here. So as said, this is the best-selling knife model for this SOG Specialty Knives brand. They don't have serial numbers. They do sell a lot of these knives by the way of mail order, online catalogs. There were other companies, local companies that sell these knives as well. Ranger Joe's, Smoky Mountain Knives Works. The list of local retailers who carried these knives were numerous. From the book Judgment Ridge, quote, on February 12th, SOG produced a somewhat narrowed down list of the individuals, companies, distributors, military accounts, and foreign accounts where it shipped SEAL 2000 model knives. It was a 69-page report that the brand gave to law enforcement.
You said 69.
With 297 separate listings, accounting for 4,929 knives.
Yeah, almost 5,000 sold.
Yeah, so we got a lot of knives to sort through. We're looking for a needle and a knife stack. Trooper West decided to focus on the sales of 2 knives at the same time. That's a good place to start.
Yeah.
Or 2 knives by the same purchaser within a short period of time. While the sheath knife research was proceeding at a snail's pace.
Yeah, I think this took them about 18 days.
Yeah. Other investigative avenues were being pursued. So everyone, and we mean everyone, was interviewed by police. This included the Xantop students, friends, family, but also their cleaning lady and a driveway snow plow guy. Police had to sort through all of the incoming information, not all of which was reliable. A lot of witnesses purported to see a lot of things, right? Reporting that the Xantops were at Niagara Falls or in a local grocery store produce section at the time when we know that they were dead. Again, we see this in a lot of investigations, right? Especially in these close-knit communities where you have people, they just want to help. So either they misremember something or they are relaying something to police and investigators that is not true, but they may believe that they saw the Xantops or somebody resembling the Xantops at a restaurant or out on the town that weekend. But one man named Paul Newcity had some actual information about a possible suspect vehicle. On the day before the murders, he had been a passenger in a vehicle on Trescott Road, right? That's right near the Xantops' house.
Right.
He says a green Subaru came barreling out of their driveway so fast it almost hit the car he was in. He glimpsed over to try to see the driver, and what he says he saw was a young, pale, clean-shaven, thin white male with dark hair who looked, quote, punk. Newcity told the Valley News,
like
quote,
a punk,
had like a punk look to him.
Okay.
Newcity told the Valley News, quote, it made a pretty strong impression on me. People around here don't leave their yard at that rate of speed, end quote. So he's clarifying why he remembered this and why he made special note of it, because it startled him and it seemed way out of the ordinary. Plus, keep in mind, at this time, too, we have police and we have the newspapers. They're actively asking the public, if you've seen anything unusual or strange in this area, we want to know. So a green Subaru vehicle was added to the list of be on the lookout vehicles.
Yeah.
And police made note of the youth of the driver. Remember, going into this and looking at this, especially early on in the investigation, one thing of consideration for investigators was the potential that a student was responsible. So we're talking college age. So the youth of the driver, the youthful look of the driver to our witness here is lining up with parts of your investigation already. Another piece of evidence soon entered the chat. This is lab test and analysis of the physical evidence found at the scene revealed that 2 of the boot prints found at the scene etched in blood. They were distinctive. In fact, they could be traced to a specific brand of footwear. They were Vask hiking boots, men's size 11.5.
So we have some suspects. We do have some leads. Again, this is in the newspapers. This is in the media. So it's all hands on deck.
Yeah.
We have We have leads that law enforcement is working the purchase of the knives, this eyewitness report. Again, the crime scene, big house, but small crime scene. And we have evidence. We have fingerprint evidence. We have boot print evidence. Plus, we have the sheaths that were left behind. So I think if you're law enforcement, you have to believe that you have enough pieces of the puzzle that you could possibly put this together and solve this crime.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're looking at this as an investigator, and I hate to use this term because it sounds so strange, but it is a term that some detective bureaus use. You would describe this as a sexy case. So a sexy case is one that has captured
has stool in the trunk.
Yeah, that's where it starts.
Yeah,
or moose
sexy.
or moose stew, whatever it was.
Moose
the jury's still out.
Stew. Look, they smell and taste the same.
But if you have a case that is catching statewide or national attention and you have evidence, right? You have leads. Those are the kinds of, you shouldn't be concerned about if it's selling papers or if your face is going to get on the old TV screen. But if you got a case where you got leads, you want something to work. You want something to chase down. And they have that here. And one of the things here that starts to take shape is in mid-February, you got all these tips, leads, and evidence and such, but you got Trooper Chuck West, who noticed that in that sales report of the knives, that 69-page sales report that he got from the brand, he noticed that there was a reseller in the next state, in Massachusetts, that had purchased a large shipment of these knives, 124 of them. So he contacts the Mass State Police and sends them to contact that seller and obtain some copies of the sales records and reports that seller would have. The seller said that the knives had been selling like hotcakes and had sold 84 of the 124 knives that he had purchased. Now, looking at the sales records, Trooper West, he catches a break here. One buyer had bought 2 SOG Seal 2000s knives at the same time. Those knives were purchased within weeks of the murders. The buyer lived in Vermont. This is like 30 miles away from the Xantop's house. The buyer's name was listed as Jim Parker. He had paid $180, the purchase price, with a money order and requested 2-day delivery of the knives. The knives were shipped to him at 10 Bradshaw Crossroad, Chelsea, Vermont. It's February 15th. We have New Hampshire State Police and Vermont State Police. They go to the home of this Jim Parker. The investigators had learned with surprise that the knife purchaser, Jim Parker, was actually a 16-year-old boy.
Yeah.
His father was John Parker. So John Parker answers the door. He's got detectives from 2 different state agencies there. He says, this is a nice family in a nice area. Mr. John Parker says, detectives, come on in. Come on in. We're happy to help. I don't know anything about what you're asking about, but let's sit around the kitchen table. Can I get you some coffee, some water, what have you? And the son is there as well. Jim Parker was there as well. So now we have 16-year-old Jim Parker with his father, John Parker, sitting at the kitchen table with detectives from 2 state agencies. There's a Sergeant Bruno present. He says that he noticed the veins on the throat of the teenage boy as throbbing. Like throbbing, he says throbbing as though his heart was pounding uncontrollably. They asked Jim Parker whether he had bought 2 SOG Seal 2000 knives. He says yes. He had bought the knives and brought them to his friend's house. His friend's name is Robert Tolick. They bought the knives, he says, to cut saplings down and to use them out in the woods and to build forts and things like that. But these knives, I should have came up with a great description of these knives. These knives are rather large. They're heavy. They're bulky. Remember, we have the medical examiner saying that It was not just a large, sharp knife, but he described it as a sturdy knife would have been used in the killings. And the boys, or at least here Jim Parker, telling the detectives, yeah, I bought the knives for me and my friend. This is what we were going to use them for. However, they were too big and bulky that they didn't work well with what we had purchased them for. So they spent $180 on these knives. These are teenage boys. They wanted to get rid of these knives, but they wanted to sell them so they could get some of their money back. So he told the detectives that the two of them went to an Army-Navy store in Burlington, Vermont, and they were trying to sell them to the retailer there so the retailer, that store, could sell the knives and make some money as well. He says the store wasn't interested in buying them from us, but while we were there, a man in the store had overheard us attempting to sell them to the store and made us an offer on the knives. At the end of the day, he says that we ended up selling the knives to this man for $60 a knife, recouping $120 of the $180 they spent on the knives.
Yeah, then when they go ask his friend about what happened with the knives, he corroborates the story, and so you go, well, that checks out.
Yeah, the problem here, though, for Jim Parker in this little sit down with his dad involved, not only is he like uncontrollably nervous. In fact, remember the movie Aliens when the alien baby grows inside of the person and then just kind of explodes out the stomach?
Yeah.
That's how this Sergeant Bruno described Jim Parker's neck. He's like, what was going on in that kid's neck looked like there was an alien baby growing inside. The problem for Parker becomes this is the story, as the captain points out, checks out when they talk to his buddy. Where the problem becomes is they ask Jim Parker, okay, we get it. You don't know what his name was. He's just some other guy in the store. Could you describe him for us? Well, he starts giving this description of somebody that's like, oh, he's like between 5'8" and 6'2", 175 to 220 pounds. I mean, he gives a description that is so vanilla and really doesn't seem to really describe any one person in any detailed fashion.
Right.
You could line up an army of 30,000 men who would resemble this very vague description provided by Jim Parker. As said, Jim Parker appeared to be uncontrollably nervous in front of the officers, so they do question him about that. They say, what's going on here? You appear to be very nervous or scared. And Jim Parker does tell them, he goes, I'm not nervous because I did anything or have anything to hide. I'm nervous because you guys are cops and I'm not used to talking to police. Before the officers left the Parker house, Trooper West noticed in the Parker driveway a green 1996 Subaru station wagon, just like the one the witness Paul Newcity had reported seeing speeding out of the Xantop's driveway on the day before the murders.
I want to thank everybody for joining us here in the garage. Join us tomorrow for part 2. Until then,
be good, be kind, and don't live.
Hey, this is Jeff Lewis from Radio Andy, live and uncensored. Catch me talking with my friends about my latest obsessions, relationship issues, and bodily ailments. With that kind of drama that seems to follow me, you never know what's going to happen.
you can listen to Jeff Lewis live at home or anywhere you are. Download the SiriusXM app for over 425 channels of ad-free music, sports, entertainment, and more. Subscribe now and get 3 months free. Offer details apply.